Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. We are back today with another live stream. It is Usyk-Dubois 2 fight week. I'm going to analyze the face-off between Alexander Usyk and Daniel Dubois. Maybe compare it to the face-offs they had before their first fight. And an interesting incident, shout out to Craig in my Element group who spotted this. Has got a sharp eye. Where Daniel Dubois shoved his own trainer Don Charles out the way after the face-off. I'll give you my thoughts on that. We've got a few other bits and pieces to get through before then. Shout out to Wart, shout out to Belt Loops Matter, Arco, Dolomite, Mr. Stewart, Belt Loops Matter. So, let's just get straight into it here. Shout out to Cloud. But before we get into it, again, quick plug for my Patreon. Make sure you check out this Usyk-Dubois film study, which I uploaded a couple of days ago. It's just over an hour long. I go through actual footage of the fight, and I point out strengths and weaknesses of both guys, certain technical things that they do, and in the case of Dubois, doesn't do, and will need to do to give himself a better chance in the rematch on Saturday. If you want to access this video along with hundreds of hours of previous exclusive boxing content, head on over to my Patreon page. All the links are in the description. And select the Boxing Brotherhood tier. Sign up. There's no contract, no commitment. You can cancel at any time. You know the drill by now. So yeah, that's for my Usyk-Dubois film study. And again, you get access to all my previous film studies I've done for many other fights and loads of other exclusive boxing content. Anyway, first story I want to talk about here, which some people will wonder why I'm talking about at all. Ricky Hatton has confirmed that his son Campbell has retired from boxing. This is his son here. He finishes with a record of 16-3. His last two fights were both losses to the same individual, James Flint. But there were fights he had earlier on in his career, which people think he also lost. So even though he's only got 3 official losses, there's maybe at least 1 or 2 unofficial losses, which should be included in the L column on his record as well. Personally, I think this is a wise move by Campbell Hatton. Just because his dad was a successful boxer, I know it's natural for sons with successful fathers to want to try and follow in their father's footsteps. But boxing is a very specific path. And there are other ways that Campbell Hatton can follow in his father's footsteps or build on his father's success. If your father is good at, I don't know, watchmaking, and he builds a watch empire, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a watchmaker. That might be, or that might have been his core skill, but perhaps you're better off being a marketing guy. Perhaps you're better off being, some type of individual behind the scenes without actually getting your hands into designing watches and understanding them. You know what I mean? So, with a guy like Ricky Hatton who made so much money, he's surely got business interests outside of boxing. And maybe that's where Campbell Hatton can find a place for himself, a lane for himself, where he could maybe excel. But professional boxing, in my opinion, is not for him. And so I think this is a wise decision to knock it on the head. If he did want to continue, then similar to the advice I gave regarding Johnny Fisher, you might want to look at Misfits. People might say it's demeaning or whatever. At the end of the day, you can make money doing Misfits, fighting YouTubers. So if there's a way into that, and obviously you have to be willing to engage in all of the effery that comes with Misfits, because it is a very trash talky type of arena, which professional boxing isn't too far away from. I mean, it is technically professional boxing in Misfits, right? But it's heavy on the trash talk and heavy on the cartoon characters, if I can describe them that way. it shouldn't be too much of a transition for somebody that's competed in proper boxing over to Misfits. So if he wants to continue, that's the avenue I reckon he would be well advised to pursue. If not, I'm sure there are many other opportunities for the young man outside of this sport. Again, his dad's got businesses. Maybe he's got hidden talents, and because of the fact that he comes from a privileged background, let's just say, because his dad was very successful, multi-millionaire, similar to Conor Benn, similar to Chris Eubank Jr. These kids are privileged. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. You know, I'd love to have grown up with a rich dad. It's all good. But yeah, your dad being that successful opens opportunities for you to do different things, to pursue your abilities, whatever they may be, make the most of your potential. So wish him all the best in future endeavors. But yeah, professional boxing's not for him. Similar to Delicious Ori, who after his first pro fight, after coming out the Olympics, decided to knock it on the head before his pro career had even started, really. I think that was a wise decision, because a guy who has had as many amateur bouts as Delicious Ori has had, in his late 20s, I think he is, to perform that poorly on your pro debut, and I never thought he looked that good in the amateurs, even though he did have success. To perform that poorly on your pro debut, to me, suggests that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, maybe psychological work, and I don't think he's got the time to do it. If he was some type of precocious talent, then maybe, you know, you figure he would learn very quickly, but I didn't see any kind of precocious talent with Delicious Ori, so I think he made the right decision, and I certainly think Campbell Hatton, who never had a fraction of the success Delicious Ori had, is also making the right decision by going in a different direction. But what do you guys think in the comments? Shout out to Connor Williams. Shout out to G-Man in the chat. Shout out to Cloud. EJ20 says Campbell Solar Panel Hatton. Nas says pull one out for Campbell. Big up Sean Fowler. He says, does Dubois really have a chance? I think he does. I'm siding with Usyk to win again, but I think Dubois has got a chance for sure. I'm certainly not counting him out. We'll come on to that fight. G-Man says 2 losses, Hatman. That's not counting his amateur career. Somebody, Cal says, hands of foam, Hatton. A nice play on hands of stone, hands of foam. So, okay, yeah, I had it on the wrong tab here with Campbell Hatton when I took the screenshot. It says 3 losses. I think that's all bouts, so including his amateur career. So, yeah, I think G-Man is right on that one. I had it on the wrong tab on BoxRec. It says he's got 3 losses, but that's including a loss he suffered in the amateurs. I should have had it on Pro. On Box Pro, which was his pro career, he's only got 2 losses. Yeah. Shout out to G-Man. NA says, most entertaining Dwyer prediction or analysis. Most entertaining for me would have been Dwyer furious after the Robert Helenius Derek Chisora fight. And also Dwyer both pre and post fight for Danny Garcia versus Rod Salka. That was hilarious. And Dwyer post fight Beterbiev against, I can't remember the guy's name. I think it was a Canadian fighter who Beterbiev stopped in the 2nd round. And there was an alleged knockdown of Beterbiev, although at the time watching it, I didn't think it was a legitimate knockdown. But yeah, Dwyer basically, and big up Dwyer, by the way, he's one of my favorite channels. He says some wild stuff, but that's part of what makes it entertaining. And he did make me chuckle in his post-fight for that Beterbiev contest, where he basically said that he was more impressed with the guy that Beterbiev stopped in 2 rounds than Beterbiev himself. Some obscure Canadian who's gone on to do nothing. But that's why we love Dwyer. Big up Dwyer. Arco says, is Misfits even still popping like that? I haven't really kept up, to be honest. It's a different world, right? And that's a great point there by Kylie. He says, like Shane McGuigan, wasn't good enough to be a boxer himself, but came into the sport through the back door as a great trainer. Yeah. Maybe Campbell Hatton has got talent as a trainer that we haven't yet seen. So maybe you could give that a go. Mark Odell says, Delicious Oreos retired already? That's right, he has. Must have been a month or 2 ago now when he retired. He looked so bad on his pro debut. It's not like he lost, but he was in there against the journeyman. And if Ori was a guy that maybe didn't have much of an amateur background and was in his early 20s, you'd say, okay, we've still got time. But when you've got that much amateur experience and you're in your late 20s and you look that poor against the journeyman on your debut, something's seriously amiss there. Something's seriously wrong. And you might want to look at doing something else. Shout out to Gordon Dalglish. All right, we got some guy trolling here. He says, Campbell Hatton is top 5 boxers of all time. His retirement will make... Oh, I've lost the comment. Where's he gone? His retirement will make Lomachenko come back from retirement. Okay. Be excited to see the Matrix back. Okay. Oh, okay. Cash says, Hatman, to clear up confusion earlier on, the Sky pay-per-view, businesses can purchase the pay-per-view, but the general public cannot. Okay, that's interesting. The business account pay-per-view price is very high, though. I see. Okay. So, basically, you can watch it on Sky pay-per-view, but only at the pub. So, it doesn't really make any difference to the public then, because you could watch it on DAZN at the pub. So, for a private individual to purchase it, DAZN is the only way, unfortunately, for this fight. That's a shame, because DAZN are very, I'm gonna call it scammy. They're very scammy. You sign up for I say sign up. You purchase a pay-per-view and you immediately get signed up to a DAZN subscription. Now remember, if you try and cancel a DAZN subscription, they somehow keep you locked in, right? And it's difficult to cancel it, and you have to keep paying beyond a certain point. It's just a bunch of very scammy, in my opinion, stuff that DAZN do. They need to stop that. But since they've basically got no competition now, why would they stop it? Yeah, Nas says, Ori looked at Atama was younger and said, allow it. Yeah. You don't want that kind of smoke. That's what he'll be competing with, right? Lennox says, Usyk on points all day. Usyk's footwork is too slick. I tend to agree. We'll come on to Usyk-Dubois. Afro Jam says he was as terrible as his name. Yeah, Delicious Ori. What was his dad thinking? Naming him that. All right, so let's move on from, as somebody said there in the chat, the hands of foam, Campbell Hatton. Onto this gentleman here, Duke McKenzie, who is one of the most prolific prediction makers, can we call it that, in boxing over the past 2 years. But even going back to the 1990s, Duke McKenzie was coming up with some incredible predictions, including picking Evander Holyfield to beat Mike Tyson first time. And I can assure you folks, basically nobody was picking Holyfield over Tyson. I think there was one journalist that I'm aware of in the entire Anglosphere who was picking Holyfield. That's it. No fans were picking Holyfield. No fighters were picking, like nobody was picking Holyfield to win that fight. But Duke McKenzie did on Sky Box Office. So Duke McKenzie's got a great prediction record. And I wanted to point this out because there are some people, mainly Americans, who I'm sure don't know who Duke McKenzie is. Duke McKenzie was a multi-weight world champion. Fought in America. Won in America, right? So put some respect on his name if you're ignorant. They're saying Brits don't know anything about world-level boxing. That's one of the comments I saw beneath the video that you can see on screen here. Duke McKenzie knows plenty about world-level boxing. He was there himself. Again, multi-time, multi-weight world champion. And you can see from the headline, Canelo will retire instead of fighting Shiraz. To be clear, he says he doesn't think Canelo's afraid of Shiraz. But at this stage of his career, Canelo has become very picky about who he fights. Really, post-Bivol, he's become very picky. He's not just trying to go out there and fight everyone dangerous, you know? Especially since the money isn't particularly great compared to the money he can make against the Terence Crawford or whoever, taking on one of these more dangerous guys, like a Benavidez. In this case, Shiraz, Duke McKenzie thinks that after the Crawford fight, win or lose, he thinks Canelo would sooner retire than fight a young, hungry, powerful, big guy like Hamza Shiraz. He doesn't, from what I can remember, say whether Shiraz would beat Canelo. I can't remember if he said he would beat Canelo, but he just doesn't think Canelo would be particularly interested in that fight. Now, this is where it gets really impressive from Duke McKenzie. He picked Carlos Adames to beat Hamza Shiraz. I didn't pick Carlos Adames to win. Some of you guys did, but I was picking Hamza Shiraz to win the fight against Adames. Okay, got that one wrong. Duke McKenzie then turned round and picked Hamza Shiraz to knock out Berlanga. Do you know what I mean? So he's gone from correctly predicting that Adames would beat Shiraz and then correctly predicting that Shiraz would beat Berlanga and knock him out. Wouldn't have any issues with him. That would be a fairly straightforward job. So bear that in mind when you think about Duke McKenzie then saying he thinks Canelo will probably avoid Shiraz rather than fight him post Crawford, win or lose. So I wouldn't dismiss it personally, the possibility that Duke McKenzie could be right on this one. Because it just appears as though unless he's getting paid an absolutely obscene amount of money, Canelo's not interested in any risks anymore. This is basically the victory lap portion of his career. Now, some people are going to say Crawford's a big risk for him. Okay, but it's a smaller guy and the payday is astronomical. Do you know what I mean? The payday that Canelo would get versus Shiraz, I have to imagine Canelo would get against Shiraz wouldn't even come remotely close to what he's been paid to fight Crawford. Yeah, big up Malik. Connor says, I've tried to cancel DAZN multiple times and they make it extremely hard. That's why I've refused to sign back up with DAZN, because the cancellation is just ridiculous. Sean Fowler says, DAZN give you sneaky bills under the carpet. Yep, all sorts of underhand tactics from DAZN, which are really quite disgusting. Indeed, JR says, and DAZN wonder why we stream fights. I was open to purchase the fight, to be honest. I mean, I could watch it at a bar here. I was open to purchase the fight. I use a VPN normally and purchase fights on Sky, previously on TNT. I was open to do it that way, but they've left me with no other choice than to stream it. And I'm somebody that regularly buys pay-per-views, so if any of the, not that they are, powers that be in broadcasting are listening, we stream fights because of your deceptive practices, okay? Spamming us with pay-per-views is bad enough, but then you're trying to make it very difficult for people to cancel subscriptions. You're making it so that when somebody pays for a pay-per-view, they automatically get subscribed to the zone. No, we don't like it. Okay, I'm not telling anybody else what to do, but I'm telling you what I do with my money. I would have otherwise purchased this pay-per-view if it was available on Sky, TNT, whatever. All right, let's move on to the next bit of news here then. The Usyk-Dubois face-off. Okay, now, Usyk had his entourage with him, and they were all shouting Usyk, Usyk, Usyk during the face-off. Pretty standard stuff. Dubois there, looking like a nightclub bouncer. He's got a nightclub bouncer bomber jacket on. Hopefully he fights a lot better than a nightclub bouncer. And just to put it in context, I used to be a nightclub bouncer. Hopefully he fights better than your typical nightclub bouncer against Alexander Usyk. Dubois is more comfortable. He looked more comfortable to me in this situation than he's looked previously, but he's still not completely comfortable. There's definitely still that social awkwardness about him, which I'm sure will always be there. And there was this unusual incident there. That's the nightclub bouncer pose right there from Dubois. Look. Trying to make his traps look as big as possible. And he was shouting at Usyk during the face-off, not in a really aggressive way, kind of in a playful way. So there was no hostility, no shoving or anything like that. There was some shoving, of course, the first face-off they had on the pitch at Wembley. But for this one, with such a big entourage for Usyk, Dubois wasn't going to do anything silly. Usyk looked his usual self, cool, calm, and collected. But what I really want to talk about was this here. So if you go to the Seconds Out YouTube channel and watch their video of this face-off, at the 3-minute 16 seconds mark, again, shout out to Craig in my Element group for pointing this out. Man's got sharp eyes. At the 3-minute 16 second mark, Daniel Dubois turns to basically leave. Don Charles is stood behind him, his coach, and he very dismissively elbows Don Charles in the chest. He doesn't say, I'm coming through, maybe put his hand on his shoulder. No, he elbows him quite rudely in the chest, like, get out my way. And then walks off. Is there trouble in camp? I don't think there's trouble in camp. I just think that it's been like this from the start with Dubois and Don Charles. Don Charles has been brought on from Dubois' perspective to help with the team, to help as part of the team rather than being their head honcho. His dad, Stan, I think Dubois still sees as the head honcho, the guy who's really calling all the shots, the guy who he ultimately listens to above anyone else, including Don Charles. And if you watch this interview that Daniel Dubois did with the Gad on TalkSport, Gareth A. Davis asks him about Don Charles. Do you give Don Charles credit, this, that, and the other? And every single time, ever since Daniel Dubois hooked up with Don Charles, every single time I've seen him asked about Don Charles, he gives the shortest answers imaginable and seems to want to move on as quickly as possible. He doesn't want to spend any time bigging up Don Charles. I've always found that really weird, but Daniel Dubois is a weird guy. And a tree is known by its fruit. So, however unusual the relationship is between himself and Don Charles, if it's working, it's working. And right now it's working. Now, from the Don Charles perspective, I've said over the years, this guy is so desperate for success after claiming that he wouldn't take Derek Chisora back. Sounds like some type of romantic relationship. It's not that. But after saying that he's got too much pride and dignity to take Chisora back after Chisora left him God knows how many times, he took him back again after that, several times. Such is the desperation this man has for success and glory, and also money, of course. So he's willing to tolerate stuff which other trainers wouldn't tolerate. People like Mark Tibbs, for example. As I understand it, I'm not an insider, but as I understand it, Mark Tibbs decided that he couldn't continue with Daniel Dubois because the dad, Stan, or Dave, I'm not sure why he uses those two names. I forget which one is his actual name. The dad, Stan, was apparently too hands-on and was undermining Mark Tibbs as a coach. And that's why Mark Tibbs decided not to continue working with Daniel Dubois. So many coaches would not tolerate what Don Charles is tolerating, despite the money and the opportunity and all that type of thing, okay? Which shows you what Don Charles is really about. With that being said, Don Charles is used to dealing with big, moody, rough guys. He's used to that. Not just because he was Derek Chisora's coach for all those years, and Derek Chisora is a very moody character. Very few coaches can actually handle Derek Chisora. Don Charles could. It's not just his experience with Chisora, but even before then, long before then, decades before then, Don Charles had his own security company. And he was dealing with bouncers and whatnot. And I can tell you from my experience as a bouncer, there's a lot of guys who are egomaniacs that are bouncers, steroid heads. And steroid abuse can lead to egomania. Trust me, I've seen it. So, years of Don Charles dealing with those type of rough, egotistical, alpha male type characters, getting an elbow in the chest from Daniel Dubois probably isn't going to bother him that much, you know? He's used to being around other guys who are kind of rough around the edges and can be short with you and rude and this, that, and the other. And he's learned as long as those guys are on his team, he's not really going to take much offense to it. That appears to be how Don Charles is. If a guy did that to him who was on the other team, Don Charles would probably want to fight him there and then. But because it's his fighter and it's on his team, maybe Don Charles is like, it's cool. He's a bit tetchy, his fight weak, he elbows me in the chest. Derek Chisora's done worse. So I'm going to say that in the interest of fairness. Daniel Dubois might not respect Don Charles, but I don't think this elbow in the chest is particularly disturbing to Don. Nas says Chisora would rather be trained by an MMA gym London shoot fighters than Don. Pro Cala says Don Charles' son is like him, just a random third wheeler in the background. I didn't actually notice whether Don Charles' son was there during the face-off. Was he there? The tough guy George Fox, who's the ultimate street fighter apparently. You know, ripping people's eyeballs out and all sorts. Shout out to Arco for the super chat. He says, I suspect Dubois' mind isn't very nuanced. It's like he sees his new confidence as a superpower that can have no negative effects. Seems like he could be prone to overconfidence, needs to be careful. I think that's a very astute observation, very intelligent comment. I agree with you. I don't think Dubois' mind is very nuanced. I think his dad does all his thinking for him. And that Dubois is basically like a wind-up toy. I don't think his brain can process too much information simultaneously. They feed some stuff into his ear, wind him up like a wind-up toy, put him on rails, off you go. That's probably the full extent of it. But given his physicality, that can be very effective, as we've seen over the past few fights. Somebody says like the Manchurian Candidate. Yeah, something like that. Wave says Stan the Obia man. That's right, Stan the Obia man, according to Spencer Fearon. Okay, some people are asking about Baby Ting and George Fox. Well, I've never seen Baby Ting fight. I've seen George Fox fight in a boxing ring. Never seen Baby Ting fight, so I couldn't even call it. Somebody says Black Forrest Gump. Well, there's a character in Forrest Gump who you could just call Daniel Dubois Bubba, right? You don't even need to call him a Black Forrest Gump because there's Bubba in Forrest Gump. I'm just going to laugh at KB's... I'm going to laugh at KB's comment. I'm not even going to read it out, bro. I can't even read it, bro, because this platform is too sensitive for me to read that comment. That comment crazy. That killed me, bro. Shout out to the Sweet Mass for the super chat. It says, do you think Matchroom should have incorporated occult symbolism into their logo redesign? A Masonic apron, perhaps? Well, I'm not sure what the benefit of it would be if they are worshipful brothers. Is that what they call themselves? Then I'm sure those in the know already know. So what will be the benefit of them incorporating Masonic symbolism into their logo? I don't know. Maybe they think they might garner some type of psychological or spiritual power, perhaps, if they did. But then again, maybe that's why they didn't. Maybe they think they wouldn't gain anything from doing it. But shout out to the Sweet Mass for the super chat. Interesting. Saying, well, let's incorporate some occult symbolism, a Masonic apron. Like the Gmail logo, which is exactly like a Masonic apron. You have to imagine that is obviously deliberate, right? Some Mason came up with that, obviously. There's probably Masons in the chat. Shout out to, there's at least one Mason in my Element group. We always tease him about it as well. Marco Dell says, Dean and Dylan, stepbrothers. Not as far as I'm aware, just friends. Not real brothers, not stepbrothers. I think just friends. Pro Callus says, Don Charles was shouting, welcome to London at Usyk like a clown, as if he hasn't won a world title and Olympic medal here. Indeed. Shout out to Deep Random Thinker for the super chat. He says, the whole of the UK is rooting for our undisputed pound-for-pound king to knock out quadruple knee with a jab at Wembley Stadium. And you know what? Shout out to Deep Random Thinker. But yes, even though Dubois is fighting in his hometown, Usyk is still going to have an enormous amount of support. Let's be real. For whatever reason, and there are various reasons, the British public hasn't really taken to Dubois, despite knocking out Anthony Joshua in spectacular fashion. Dubois doesn't have an image or a personality that really captivates the British public. Maybe it's his social awkwardness. So yeah, and Usyk, of course, has won the respect of so many UK fans. He has. Not just because he's beaten all the UK heavyweights, the best ones anyway, but because of the way he's conducted himself as a champion. A lot of people really appreciate that. I appreciate it, the way he's conducted himself as a champion. Not ducking any challenges, going straight for the jugular at cruiserweight and at heavyweight. It's refreshing to have a champion like that ruling the roost in boxing's premier division. Shout out to Lawrence King for the super chat. He says, I like Usyk. It's his mega fanboys I can't stand. Well, you know, every fighter has got mega fanboys. That just comes with the territory. Some people go overboard. Some people go way overboard. But UK boxing fans have always been the types of fans who will respect foreign fighters if they go over to the UK and beat the top British fighters. They'll always respect the foreign fighters. Unless the foreign fighter is like super obnoxious or something and disrespectful, they'll always respect the foreign fighter. And they'll welcome them back and support them. And yeah, UK boxing fans have always been like that. No problem. If you win their respect in the ring, that's it. They'll love you for it. You know, like the movie Gladiator with Maximus, where Oliver Reed's character, I forget his character's name, is talking about, you know, getting the crowd to love you, no matter where you're from. Comfy Bold says, UK boxing fans didn't respect Hagler when he beat Simpson. That's true. Touche. Although that was a different era, late 70s, early 80s? Was that 80s? They threw bottles and all sorts of stuff. Or was that the Minter fight, or was that the Simpson fight where Hagler was pelted with bottles and racist abuse and all that type of business? Yeah, that was ugly. But I don't want to blame that on British fans. I want to say that was the Minter fans, because Minter made some like racial remarks in the lead up to the Hagler fight. And, you know, he was obviously going to attract a certain element of people in Britain making those kind of remarks. Do you know what I mean? That isn't necessarily indicative of all British boxing fans at the time who were supporting people like Frank Bruno. A shout out to Lawrence King. He says, yeah, Usyk fighting Fury, Joshua, and Dubois twice is why he is a great, plus what he did at Cruiser. If it was Fury as champ now, it would be Chisora 4. Absolutely correct. Maybe even Otto Wallin 2. Tom Schwartz 2. Seriously, you can't put anything past Luke Partridge. Man's just got no shame. There you go. Little Jacob says Minter had the Millwall mob supporting him. Yeah. Linkage says that was the National Front. He stoked up all that Minter by his pre-fight comments. Minter was like the precursor to Bernard Hopkins years later. Because basically Alan Minter said he'd never let a black man beat him. And, you know, decades after that, you had Hopkins saying he'd never let a white man beat him. Then he says, Fury versus Chisora 10 in a wheelchair. Mr. Lucas says the next. Did Minter actually say that? Demir says, Minter also said, sure there have been injuries and deaths in boxing, but none of them serious. Did he say that? That's a bizarre comment. Tony S says, David Morrell versus Joshua Buatsi, who you got? I'm not sure, but that's a great matchup to make. A crossroads fight. That's a great fight to make right now. Yes. Morrell, who apparently didn't look good on the weekend, and in some people's minds, many people's minds maybe, got a gift. Put him up against Joshua Buatsi coming off the Callum Smith loss. Great crossroads fight. Shout out to Deep Random Thinker for the super chat. He says, Luke Partridge lost to McDermott. Wallin, Wilder, Ngannou, Usyk twice, and cheated against Cunningham. So, Deep Random Thinker is really trying to make the Partridge fans cry here. With that comment. Let's dissect it. So, he absolutely lost to McDermott in the first fight. Even his own dad, according to John McDermott, acknowledged it to McDermott after the fight, came up and shook his hand and said, you won that, and so on and so on. The Otto Wallin fight could have easily been stopped because the cut was so horrendous. And it wasn't caused by a clash of heads or an elbow, it was a clean left hand. If it wasn't Tyson Fury in there, if he wasn't very firmly the A side, they may well have stopped it. So there's definitely a case to be made that that should have been a loss. I'm not saying definitively it should have been lost, but there's a case to be made. The first Wilder fight, KO, I'm not sure I agree on that one, but I get where you're coming from. Some people say the count was very close, right? Maybe some people say it was slow, this, that, and the other. The Ngannou fight, I personally thought Usyk won. Usyk. I thought that Fury won the Ngannou fight, but it could have gone to Ngannou for sure. It was close enough to make it plausible, to make an Ngannou win plausible, but I personally had Fury winning it. And then the two Usyk fights, of course, he lost. Cunningham, he was holding and hitting, which is illegal in boxing, indeed. And that won him the fight when he held and hit. So shout out to Deep Random Thinker. He's really coming for them Partridge fanboy tears. That's going with pure savagery and the heart. He wants the hearts of the Partridge fanboys. That's what Deep Random Thinker is after now. He wants to rip your heart out your chest if you're a Partridge fanboy. A shout out to Lawrence King for the super chat. He says, they even changed the judging rules after McDermott won, which is crazy to think about. Yeah, that's how contentious it was as a decision. There was massive uproar. Even though it was a relatively low-level domestic fight, it was on BBC News and it was all over the place at the time. It was big news because of how much of a travesty it was perceived to be. Cash says refs should never score fights. Shout out to Connor Williams. Is there anywhere else in the world outside the UK where refs score fights? I'm not aware of anywhere else, but I can't tell you definitively. Let Me A says, anywhere know where the footage is of Daniel pushing his coach? It's in a seconds out video of the face-off between Usyk and Dubois at the 3-minute, 16-second mark exactly. There's a screenshot of it on screen right now. That is where Dubois puts his elbow out to shove Don Charles out the way. Literally elbows him in the middle of the chest. Doesn't say excuse me. Just elbows him in the middle of the chest. Get out of my way. But as I said earlier on, Don Charles might not see that as a big deal because he's dealt with so many rough characters throughout his life, not just in boxing, but even before boxing when he was running a security firm. So it may not really mean anything, but it's still interesting to me that there's that type of dynamic between fighter and trainer. I remember Danny Jacobs doing something similar with his former trainer. Is it Andre Rosier? I always forget his first name. There's something a bit baby oil and Diddy-ish about Rosier and Danny Jacobs, though. Or is it, maybe it's just me, but I always thought there's something a bit baby oil about those two, bro. Andre Rosier, to me, gives off them vibes, as does Danny Jacobs. But yeah, I remember there was a time on stage during a weigh-in when Jacobs like proper shoved Rosier away, or he knocked his hand down, or I was like, what's going on there? Mr. Lucas has thoughts on Campbell Hatton retiring. Actually spoke about that towards the beginning of the stream. But to reiterate, big up Mr. Luca, to reiterate, I think Campbell Hatton's making the right decision. I don't think professional boxing is for him. Shout out to Lawrence King for the super chat. He says, to me personally, it looks more like Dubois is like, let's go with the shove more than anything. Also, Dubois' IQ is like 20. He isn't very aware. That's a very good comment. Yeah. Dubois is very socially awkward. He doesn't understand the normal social cues. And with that may come unusual behavior, which other people may perceive to be rude. But maybe Don Charles realizes that Daniel Dubois is wired that way. And therefore, he's very patient with it. So that's a very good comment, Lawrence King, actually. Very good comment. Exactamundo, big up. He says, was not surprised Hatton retired. He found his level, no shame in it. No shame in it at all. He gave it a go. Boxing weren't for him. He tried his best. Boxing weren't for him. I'm sure he can find something to turn his hand to where he'll be more successful. Can't fault a man for giving it a go. A CGP says, I believe Dubois has Asperger's, just my opinion. And my opinion too. In my unprofessional opinion, he's on the spectrum somewhere. Marco Dell says, what exactly is Asperger's? It's a spectrum disorder. Is it a form of autism or very close to autism? It's in that kind of realm, right? Bexy says, Campbell Hatton is fitting solar panels with Pricey. And Dubois, in the interview he did with Gad, which was uploaded earlier on today, I'm going to get the thumbnail up here, this one, he kept on saying over and over again that his mindset against Usyk is just to be a savage, to go in there and set about his man. And again, since Dubois is like a wind-up toy, he may try to do that. I mean, he certainly came out like that against Hrgovic and Joshua in particular. From the opening bell, man came flying out the blocks and tore right into both those guys. But how successful can he be fighting that way against Usyk? Usyk has got much better feet than Hrgovic and Joshua, much faster, more fluid than both those guys, better movement, better coordination, better counterpuncher. So Dubois might come out and try to do that early doors. But if he gets clipped with a couple shots, will he get put back in his box? That's the gamble that you take. But I think Dubois' best bet is to do exactly what I just described. And to do what he seemingly intends to do based upon his comments in the GAD interview. Go out there, try to set about Usyk. Don't worry about what Usyk is doing. I mean, I know it's easier said than done. You do have to worry to some extent. But the more you worry about what Usyk is going to do and the traps that he's trying to set, the easier you're making his job. You're better off going in there with a level of ignorance, you know, and concentrating more on the shots that you intend to land and not worry about what he's thinking or the traps he's setting. Just bull your way through. You have to be willing to, what's the word I'm looking for? What's the terminology I'm looking for? It's not balls to the wall. What's the phrase that people use? Do or die even, you know? You've got to have a do or die mentality when you go in there against Usyk. It's either his face or mine. I'm going to either knock him out or get knocked out trying. Somebody says roll the dice. Big up Ben Davison, a.k.a. Vidal Sassoon. Shout out to Lawrence King. He says, I think Dubois has to put it on the line. Every boxer ends up trying to box with Usyk and wins 3 or so rounds. Only chance is to stick it on him. Yeah, completely agree. Now, if you get knocked out in the process of doing that, people are going to say, oh, what a stupid thing to do. He went more rounds last time. AJ went the distance with him. Partridge went the distance with him. Your advice has gone and got him knocked out. People are going to disregard the fact that my advice, it's not just my advice, it's Lawrence King's advice and many other people's advice, comes with risk. Yes, of course it does. If you go balls to the wall against Usyk, all-out attack, not only does it increase the chances of you knocking him out, it increases the chances of him knocking you out. But that's the gamble that you take. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's what you have to do. You have to go out there and be hyper-aggressive and not get into any kind of thinking match with him, any kind of boxing match. But yeah, big up Lawrence King every time. Exactamundo says, do you think Turkey is setting up AJ versus Paul for next year, or are we going to get Tommy Fury again? Well, Jake Paul keeps pushing a potential Anthony Joshua fight back. Initially, he made out as though he'd be willing to fight AJ this year. Then he said early next year. And now he's saying back end of next year. So I don't think he's serious at this stage. Maybe he's waiting to see what AJ looks like in his next contest. And if he looks sufficiently bad, and if Paul continues to improve in the meantime, he'll consider it. But right now, I don't think he's serious. Or else, why would you push the fight back that far? Why are you pushing the fight back 1.5 years? No, he ain't serious. So until he gets serious, then I don't think Turkey's necessarily going to be planning for it. Long story short, yeah, I reckon there's more of a chance that he'd fight Tommy Fury again. Or maybe even KSI. But probably Fury before KSI. Big up Lawrence King. He says, nothing worse than the Fury 2 fight where Fury rocked up fat, didn't want to be there, just waiting for the 12 rounds to end so he can pretend he won. Oh, Partridge. He's getting it in the neck tonight. Poor Partridge. Well, the interesting thing is, Turkey said he wasn't interested in doing misfits type boxing events. But Jake Paul has crossed over into fighting real boxers now, even if they're way past their best. And he's making a ton of money. And he's drawing a ton of attention. So, okay. I can accept it. I'm one of these people that actually thinks that Jake Paul is somewhat good for boxing. And that Misfits is good for boxing. And what's going on with Tony Yoka, by the way? Is he going to fight Joe Joyce? Because they were talking about lining those two guys up to face each other. I think that would be a great shout. Tony Yoka versus Joe Joyce at this stage, a rematch of their Olympic bout, which Tony Yoka got a controversial decision win in. Both guys are at, you would think, the back end of their careers. I think Tony Yoka's a bit younger. So, yeah, why not put them in the ring against each other now? Big up Mr. Luker, he says, what should Usyk do? Take center ring? Absolutely. Yes. Take center ring now. He took center ring in the first fight. He's going to attempt to take center ring in the second fight. If Dubois comes at him like a madman, swinging all kind of big shots, Usyk is going to move. Can Daniel Dubois really swing at him like a madman with all sorts of huge bombs for more than 3 or 4 rounds before getting tired? He does have good stamina, but at the end of the day, he's a big heavyweight. Whatever he is, 240, 250. Guys that size generally can't, and Daniel Dubois is a power puncher. He's a guy who loads up on just about everything. Even his jab has got loads of weight behind it. He doesn't really vary the power of his shots much. So, Usyk would really, all Usyk would have to do really if Dubois is throwing all these big shots is not be silly, stay out the way, wait for Dubois to get tired, and then open up on him. I say all he would have to do. Depends how well Dubois is prepared when it comes to throwing the kitchen sink, because Derek Chisora was very creative against Usyk. In the back end of Chisora's career, we've seen him switch southpaw after throwing the right hand, putting all his weight into it. His feet come square, rather than putting his right foot back to reset from an orthodox position. He instead pushes his right foot forward and throws a right hook. Any of you guys noticed that? He was doing it in the Wallen fight too. So Chisora was quite creative with his offense, trapping Usyk, you know? Also jabbing with his right hand and then throwing the left at times. Can Daniel Dubois be that creative with his offense? We shall see. But the more creative he can be, the more chance he has of landing the big shots necessary to damage the 38-year-old Ukrainian and get the job done. But yeah, I think Usyk should try to take center ring if he thinks he can hold center ring without getting into a big firefight where he could take something he doesn't need to be taking at his age. But if Dubois all over him, yeah, you get on your bike for a little bit. See if he tires out. Try to walk him onto some stuff. Big up Lawrence King. He says, a lot of people claiming the Chavez Jr. fight was fixed due to the fact that Chavez didn't throw punches until the last 2 rounds. What do you think? I don't think it was fixed, but I'm more open to the possibility that it was than with the Mike Tyson fight. I don't think the Mike Tyson fight was fixed at all. Not at all. I don't see why you would need to fix a fight. The guy's 60 years old. He looked terrible at the open workout. Terrible in training camp if you watch the shoulder programming on Netflix. Chavez Jr., what was he, late 30s? Or maybe just about 40? Had fought in the past few years. was much fresher than a Mike Tyson. So I don't completely dismiss the possibility that it was some kind of fixed WWE Mickey Rourke type scenario. But I'm more leaning towards the possibility that it was just real. And Chavez Jr. didn't really throw shots, didn't let his hands go until the final rounds because he was afraid of Jake Paul's power. Chavez Jr. was a world champion at middleweight when he was basically a small cruiserweight in there fighting middleweights. You know, he was like the ultimate weight bully. As soon as he stepped up to 175 and started fighting people closer to his own size, he was getting stopped. He was quitting in fights, you know? A guy who's quit several times in fights, the first time he was fighting people his own size, someone like that can get intimidated. Do you know what I mean? At the age of 40 against a Jake Paul. They can get intimidated and not want to open up and maybe suffer a knockout defeat. Because it's humiliating enough losing to a YouTuber. Imagine losing to a YouTuber by knockout when you're a former world champion boxer in front of your dad, one of the greatest Mexican fighters of all time. So yeah, that's my take on it. Shout out to Lawrence King. Shout out to Alex. He says, Dubois wouldn't hold back against a grandma sparring. Well, yeah, Dubois is vicious. But it remains to be seen how well he does against that southpaw style again of Alexander Usyk. The feints, the footwork, all that type of stuff. It threw Dubois off in the first fight the same way it throws off most Usyk opponents. And for all Dubois' momentum coming into this rematch, we don't know how he was going to react when he faces that style again. And again, just to plug my latest Patreon boxing upload, the Usyk-Dubois film study, I go into the technical things that Usyk does, the athletic things that he does, the biomechanics that he has, which unsettled Daniel Dubois and so many other fighters who he's faced. From the opening bell, before either guy had landed any punches, there were things that Usyk was doing that were unsettling Dubois right away. And so I go through that and point those things out in this film study where, again, I play the actual video of the fight and stop it at key moments and talk you through what's going on from a technical perspective and even from a psychological perspective, a tactical perspective, and so on. So check out my Usyk-Dubois film study on Patreon. It's on the Boxing Brotherhood tier. No contract, no commitment. You know the drill. Cancel at any time. You can just download the Patreon app from the Play Store. Could get it from the App Store too, but you're better off, even if you're an Apple user, signing up on a desktop, you know, on a laptop or whatever, because the App Store charge you extra. So my Patreon content is more expensive if you buy it through the App Store than if you buy it on the Play Store or if you just use a laptop to go to the Patreon website. God knows what Apple are doing with those extra charges. Weird stuff. So save yourself some money. Anyway, Usyk-Dubois. Let's get a show of hands. I've done this in previous streams, but let's get a show of hands. Who's picking Usyk, who's picking Dubois, and by what method? Shout out to Jay Silver. All right, Comfy Bolt says Usyk points. Exactamundo's got 4K on Usyk. Ash Rayman says Usyk decision. Tawheed says Usyk stops Dubois in 9. Chief says Usyk stoppage again. Shout out to Lawrence King. He says, I know Chavez was never a real world-level fighter, but to lose to Anderson Silva and Jake Paul when you're still in your 30s after winning the WBC belt is straight up diabolical. It is diabolical. It is diabolical, but again, it speaks to what a absurd weight bully Chavez Jr. was. If he'd been fighting guys his own size from the beginning, he never would have got anywhere near a world title. But because he was cartoonishly big compared to the guys he was competing against, you know, he was like, people accused Jarrett Hurd of being a weight bully, and he was. But Chavez Jr. was like Jarrett Hurd on roids. Not literally, but you know what I mean. Figuratively. James Clifford's got Usyk by DQ. That's an interesting one. You care to elaborate on that? Usyk by DQ? You think Dubois is going to do some dirty stuff in there? Headbutts, low blows? Peter Marshall says Usyk stoppage. S.A. has got Usyk winning. Stops him again, says S.A. Luke Reed says I want Usyk to retire. He's getting on. Sports fan says Dubois always picked the man in his mid-20s against the man pushing 40. Okay. Well, sports fan is going for Dubois. Arco is going for Dubois mid-round stoppage. Ibrahim says, I've got Usyk by late stoppage. I can see Dubois tiring himself out and being more aggressive than the first fight, but I don't think it will be enough. Anthony's got Usyk stoppage 9-12. Little Jacob says the majority of Dubois' fans have probably got stumps instead of hands. I won't go there. Jimbo says, I want Dubois to win, but I've got Usyk by late stoppage. Kylie says, late stoppage Usyk. Lawrence King is going for Dubois by stoppage. Albie says, Usyk mentally and physically wears Dubois down and KOs him in round 8, similar to the Tony Bellew fight. Daniel Rain says, Usyk points, late stoppage, can't decide, but Usyk will win. Boxing Arena says, Usyk by decision, but will be quite close and ugly. Afro Jammer's got Usyk decision. I've got Usyk by decision as well. Jonathan Finch, says Usyk, with it being pretty much a carbon copy of the first fight. Kevin Lampard says Usyk stoppage win in 7. John says, has Duke McKenzie got any predictions wrong? I think he has. Yeah, I'm sure he has got some wrong. But he's on a hell of a run, and he gets the most major predictions right. And he's, of course, picking Usyk to win this one again. President Brush says Dubois by robbery. Low blow gets allowed due to home cooking. Jack Trussler has got Dubois in the 7th with a body shot. Corey says thoughts on Chavez Jr. getting deported. Boxing has always been full of criminals. Many fighters, many promoters, many managers in particular are linked to criminals. So I'm not surprised by that. I'm not surprised by the Steffi Bull thing either. Boxing's always had the dirty underbelly, you know. It's part and parcel of the game. It is what it is. Bexy's got Usyk on points. Tony says, have Usyk winning by decision, but have a feeling Usyk gets dropped early. CGP says, I think Usyk will wear Dubois down and win in the later rounds, probably round 8. Boxing Arena says DQ is a fair shout. Dubois is so reckless in there, and I think there will be an accidental low blow as he's going to come in rushing. That's logical. That's logical. Okay, Ardil says Dubois in round 1. All right, that's a bold pick if you're serious. Troy says, I want Dubois, but I think Usyk. Ishmael says Dubois gets frustrated and quits. Okay. Agni says Dubois headbutts and low blows his way to victory. Got Tosserman picking Usyk in the 11th. All right. Yep, as Casa said there, the underworld in boxing, hand in hand, similar with K1. Nas says Chavez is married to El Chapo's ex-wife. Shout out to James Clifford for the super chat. Big up. He says, I'm off to see Usyk at Wembley, as it's on my bucket list to see the heavyweight championship of the world. Have a feeling that rather than get stopped again, the frustrated Triple D goes low again and channels his inner Galata for a DQ. And you're not alone, James Clifford. Big up. It's a very reasonable shout because Dubois' mantra for the longest time, not just for this fight, but for his past few fights, is by any means necessary. He keeps repeating that over and over again as if somebody's put it in his head. And sounds like Malcolm X. For those of you who don't know, Malcolm X was saying that back in the 60s. By any means necessary. And by any means necessary, I'm going to take it literally. As in, he will use legal or illegal tactics to try and get the job done. So, yeah, there could be a chance he gets disqualified. But what I will say, though, James, is that it would take a very brave referee to disqualify Daniel Dubois at Wembley on a Frank Warren show. Do you know what I mean? Even if he deserves to get disqualified, it would take a very, very brave ref to actually do it. In fact, who is the ref? Let's get the ref up here. Big up 3D Pool title for the super chat. Big up. Let me have a look who the referee actually is for this fight. Does it yet say on BoxRec? Doesn't appear to say here who the referee's going to be. Do any of you guys know? Have you heard? Because there's no information currently on who the ref's going to be. Let me do a quick search here. Because then you can look into the referee's history and see whether they have a track record of making bold calls. Because that would be a very bold call to disqualify Dubois on the Frank Warren show at Wembley. Anyone know who the ref is? Shout out to Nathan for the super chat. He says, Hatman, current Dubois versus Prime Wilder, who you got? That's a real good fight. A real good fight. I think I've got Dubois, you know, because of his jab. I mean, it's a fight that Wilder could definitely win, but I like Dubois' balance. He comes at you with the jab first before he lets his hooks go. His jab pushes you off balance. And then he comes in with his power shots. Pushing Wilder off balance with a jab first kind of nullifies the right hand before the big Dubois hooks come in. So I certainly wouldn't be counting Wilder out. He's got a kind of power that could send Dubois to the shadow realm. But I'll probably go with Dubois. I've never actually thought of that matchup before. Shout out to Nathan. Laria? Is it Laria? Shout out to Nathan because, yeah, for some reason, I've never considered that matchup before. That's a really interesting one. Yeah, I'll go with Dubois. Okay, some people are mentioning refs here. Some people got jokes. Kyle says Harvey Price is the ref. Tawheed says, please not Howard Foster. The king of early stoppages, Howard Foster. Steve Gray also likes the early stoppages, doesn't he? Definitely not Ian John Lewis. He's fallen out with the British Boxing Board of Control. Shout out to Belt Loops Matter. Says Hagler was only 11 years old, older than B-Hop, yet he stopped fighting in 1987, and Hopkins stopped fighting in 2016. Yeah, Hopkins started calling himself the alien for good reason, because it was flipping bizarre how long he was able to compete at world level for and continue beating fighters in their 20s. It was bizarre. An incredibly long boxing career, and still holds the record as the oldest world champion in history. Okay, Warrior Poet says, Usyk-Dubois destroys Usyk's balls and gets DQ'd. So there's quite a few people here going for an Usyk win via DQ. James Clifford is picking that result. Warrior Poet is going for that. And there have been several other people in the chat also who think that it's going to end in a DQ win for Usyk. With Dubois just doing far too much. Or breaking the rules far too much, should I say. Little Jacob says, Bernard Hopkins is like the boxing equivalent of LeBron James for his longevity. Yeah, LeBron James' longevity is crazy as well. How long's LeBron James been a top player in the NBA? Since the late 90s? It's something crazy like that, right? Because I remember watching a Chris Rock comedy. The first time I'd ever heard of LeBron was in a Chris Rock stand-up in the late 90s. And that must have come out maybe 97 or something, 99. And he mentioned LeBron then. I didn't know who LeBron was. I wasn't really following basketball like that at that point. And I subsequently looked him up. NJ GTV says 03. Okay, a little bit later than I thought then, but still. It's a very long time, over 20 years. Shout out to Nathan for the super chat. He says, Hatman Dubois versus Prime Vlad. Okay, surname is pronounced Laye. All right, big up. Nathan Laye. I'm saying it right now. Dubois versus Prime Vlad. That's a real good fight as well. Both guys got great jabs. Both guys have got that bounce. They like to fight off a bounce. Vlad was better with the straight shots, but Vlad could be roughed up. Dubois is definitely better than Vlad in a firefight. That's a real good fight. Wow. Dubois got quick feet, even though he's a little shorter than Vlad. His feet are quick. He can duck underneath shots. That's a real good fight, you know. That's a real good fight. I'm stumped on that one, seriously, because styles make fights. Vlad was a dominant champion, we know. But would Dubois just have the right style to get him out of there with his roughness and his jab and his quick feet? And that's a real good fight. That's a real good fight. If we sent Dubois back in a time machine, the current version of Dubois, to fight Vlad at his peak, I'd probably pick Vlad, but I wouldn't be that confident, to be honest. Kayvon Green says, I met LeBron and his mama in high school, and they're both nuts. Okay. Little Jacob says Jordan is still the GOAT. I completely agree with that, but I'm no basketball aficionado. All I can tell you is I watched Jordan play in the 1990s during his peak with the Bulls, And he carried, I don't want to say he carried the team, but he was like a one-man army. It was crazy watching Jordan play in his prime. He was so good and he was so dominant on the court. It's as if he was the only player that mattered. Obviously, there were other players doing all sorts of stuff, even for the Bulls, right? But Jordan was always doing stuff, you know, offensively and defensively. So, and even someone who's relatively illiterate in basketball like myself, you could see watching Jordan that he was a phenom. You didn't need to be educated to realize how good he was. Educated in basketball, I mean, to realize how good he was. It jumped out at you right away. And when Jordan wasn't playing, the Bulls weren't the same. Of course, Scottie Pippen contributed. Dennis Rodman, you know. But the team was not the same without MJ. MJ was a beast. A big up Belt Loops Matters. He says, I think Triple D punches with Usyk and gets the KO. All right, Belt Loops Matters is picking Dubois to get it done. Triple D. He doesn't think it'll be triple knee, but instead Triple D. A shout to Jack Trussler for the super chat. He says, had a dream White KO'd Itama. White was getting lit up like a Christmas tree and landed a left hook from nowhere. I got a feeling White causes an upset. And this claim that Itama's been getting dropped in sparring is growing legs. There's quite a few people repeating this now, that Itama's got some kind of chin problem. I don't know what to make of it. It's possible he has a chin problem, but all I can tell you is he doesn't fight like a guy that's got a chin problem. When a guy's got a chin problem, there's a hesitance about them. They're not as gung-ho. They're not as willing to take risks. If they're smart anyway. You know, if it's just a fighter that doesn't have a very high IQ, boxing IQ I'm talking about, not talking about like actual IQ. Boxing IQ and actual IQ are very different things. Floyd Mayweather has a high boxing IQ. Do you think he has a high actual IQ? I doubt it. And I think Itama's got a pretty high boxing IQ. I'm not saying he's a Mayweather, but he doesn't fight like somebody that is protecting a weak chin, but you never know till you know. So we'll have to wait and see when he does get clipped, and whether it's going to be the Dylan White fight where we see it. Bexy with a random one. Do you let your missus have male friends? I wouldn't date someone who had male friends in the first place. Do you know what I mean? So rather than getting with a girl and then telling her you got to cut all your male friends off, we could, you know, I wouldn't even get into a relationship with a girl who's got a bunch of male. Why has she got a bunch of male friends for? Because those guys are only hanging around to try and smash. That's just what it is. And if you have any issues in your relationship, who do you think she's going to run to? The guys that she knew before you, who are her real friends, and she knows that they are after the box. But she likes to play the fake little game of, oh no, they're just my friends. Yeah, okay. So I wouldn't get into a relationship with a girl who's got male friends in the first place. Mora's man says White is getting absolutely destroyed. That's what I see. So NJGTV makes a good point. He says Joshua had been dropped by Price and Dubois in sparring when he was undefeated. He used to be gung-ho before Ruiz won. Touche. That's a good point. And Ibrahim is also making the same point. He says, couldn't you say the same for AJ back then? I take your points well. Touche. So we'll just have to find out when the timer does get clipped. We'll just have to find out. If Dillian Whyte did get the job done, it wouldn't be the biggest upset in the world. Again, Atama's a prospect. It's not like Atama's some world champion and he's just got cleaned out by a washed up former contender. No. Atama is a prospect. He hasn't fought anyone who's really come to fight yet. Well, you could say that his last opponent came to fight, but he didn't have the ability. Yeah, the last opponent whose name escapes me. What was the guy called that Atama just knocked out? The former NFL guy. He did actually come to fight, but he didn't have the ability to test Atama. The others really didn't come to fight. I mean, Dempsey McKean, maybe in his head he thought he was going to give it a go, but as soon as he got hit hard the first time, he was done. Balogan, there you go. Mike Balogan. Shout out to G-Man. Yeah, Mike Balogan did genuinely give it a go, but it just wasn't good enough. A very astute comment by TM. He says, if you're young and confident, a couple of sparring incidents might not affect you. Young people in general often think they're invincible, and perhaps this is the case with Atama. Another good comment. A lot of good comments coming in today. Very good comments. Kayvon Green says, yeah, but everyone is talking about him like he's the next coming. They are, but I'm only speaking from my perspective. From my perspective, it wouldn't be some huge, seismic shock if Dillian Whyte beat Moses Atama. From my personal perspective, it wouldn't be that massive a shock. I'd be a little surprised because I am expecting Atama to win and win well, but he's an untested green fighter. And boxing history is littered with examples of green fighters getting taken out by grizzled old vets. I mean, David Haye when he fought Carl Thompson. David Haye was a big favorite in that fight. It's a fight he really should have won, but ignorance and overconfidence saw David Haye gas out in a couple of rounds. What was it, 4 or 5 rounds? And taken out by an old Carl Thompson who'd been stopped several times in the past. And he was always getting hurt in fights. So that happens to prospects, Shout out to President Brush for the super chat. He says, is there a rematch clause for Dubois Usyk? I'm not sure, but I would imagine there probably will be, going off previous unifications and whatnot, which kind of makes me sigh because we've had far too many rematches in the heavyweight division. So shout out to President Brush. So let me do a quick check here and see if there's anything that I can uncover. Any information on this? Okay, just on a quick search, I've taken a cursory glance at the results. Can't see anything about a rematch clause. But I'd be pleasantly surprised if there isn't one. Let's just put it that way. I'm expecting there to be one. Choice says no rematch clause. If that's the case, I'm pleasantly surprised. Okay, they're saying Deep Random Thinker says rematch clause for Usyk only. All right. In the event that he were to lose, he would have the option. Okay. Because in the Usyk Fury fights, obviously, it was a 2-way rematch clause, so either guy could activate it if they lost. Albie says, Warren said the winner would definitely fight Parker. Kayvon Green says, we've been seeing the same guys fight for the last 5 years. Please no rematches. I'm with you, my bro. Please no rematches. Whoever wins, let's just move on. One and done. Unless it's like ridiculously controversial, then let's move on. Whoever wins. Tosserman says, Amir Khan got chinned by Prescott in 1 round and still had a good career. Wouldn't be the end of the world if Moses got chinned off Dillon, but it would certainly slow his momentum. Absolutely. Absolutely. He's 20 years of age. He's clearly very talented. In previous streams, people asked me who was more talented, a young Anthony Joshua or Moses Itauma. In my opinion, Itauma is light years above Anthony Joshua in terms of talent. Way more talented than Anthony Joshua, in my opinion. So, okay, if he lost to Dillian Whyte at 20 years of age, he's got years and years and years to come back, and he's got enough talent to come back. Kyle says, Hatman, can a beta male become an alpha male? And can a beta male become an alpha male? Or I guess you meant to say it the other way around. Can an alpha male become a beta male? Yes, to both. Both can happen. But it's normally going to happen when somebody is young and some dramatic or traumatic event happens in their lives and somebody's personality can shift. I've seen guys, and many people who grew up in, I don't know, maybe not even particularly rough neighborhoods, but I grew up in a rough neighborhood, and I saw guys go from being like timid, scared guys who were forced to fight, and they ended up discovering that they could punch or whatever, they could, naturally had an ability to get busy, and literally overnight when they were teenagers, they went from being someone who was scared and timid to being somebody who was like real cocky and sure of themselves after they realized they could fight, when they knocked out somebody who they weren't supposed to knock out, like that. I mean, Mike Tyson was like that. He's the best example you could ever give was Mike Tyson. He was like a shy, fat kid, wore glasses, was getting bullied, used to hide away and play with his sisters, and he had a girly voice and all this type of stuff. And then one day a bully went too far and ripped the head off his pigeon and turned him into a monster. So yes, there are people who can go from beta to alpha, but with a lot of those guys who are naturally beta but turn into alpha because they discover that they can fight, or they've got a ruthless streak to them somehow, they still retain some beta-ness about them, as Mike Tyson does. Yeah, Mike Tyson's got this thing where he likes the woman in his life to be the boss. Yeah, Mike Tyson's got that kind of beta trait about him still. But overall, you'd say Mike Tyson was an alpha, right? He scares most alpha males, let's be real. A prime Mike Tyson, I remember Jamie Foxx doing that stand-up routine where he said, Mike Tyson, when he was in the nightclub or whatever looking for somebody, he was like a pit bull off the leash. And everyone was like, yo, there's a pit off the leash. Yo, is that your pit? Is that your pit? Yeah, the biggest, toughest, scariest dudes, Mike Tyson would scare him. And an alpha male could turn into a beta male if something traumatic enough happened to them. For sure. If they went through like a really traumatic, violent experience, they could turn beta. Yeah. I've seen stuff like that. Shout out to Ibrahim for the super chat. He says, do you think AJ and Fury should have worked their way back up to a certain degree after Usyk based on your stance on rematches? Absolutely. Absolutely. I was against all the rematches. I was against the AJ Usyk rematch, even though I could accept it because Usyk was Actually, no. I was totally against it. It's the Ruiz one that I could accept. I didn't want AJ to fight Ruiz again because I wanted Ruiz to unify with Wilder, because undisputed was always the priority for me, regardless of who the fighters were. But I could understand there being a rematch clause in that contract because AJ gave Ruiz he voluntarily fought Ruiz. He gave him a shot. But for the Usyk fight, I was totally against the rematch because Usyk was mandatory. There shouldn't be rematch clauses for mandatories. That's something that started in the Klitschko era, and unfortunately these promoters and fighters, let's be real, have continued with it. So I was against that rematch. I was against the Partridge rematch with Usyk. And absolutely, I think these guys, like in the old days, back in the 90s, should be fighting their way back up to title contention. Absolutely, 100% Ibrahim. So big up. Great question. And that's my stance on it. Kyle says Mike Tyson is a super simp. Yeah, it was interesting seeing Mike Tyson. Exactly, right there. Kyle said it. When Mike Tyson was on the podcast with LL Cool J, and Mike Tyson was coming out with such simpish comments, the LL Cool J was like, damn. He's like, damn, Mike. That's crazy simpish. Obviously, he didn't come out and call him a straight up simp, but you could see LL Cool J was taken aback by some of the simpish comments Mike Tyson was making. Yeah. Because LL Cool J, more likely, is a natural alpha. Not that LL Cool J would last 2 seconds with Mike Tyson in a fight, right? But LL Cool J's personality type is more like natural alpha. Not a guy who was getting bullied and then, because of traumatic experiences became an alpha when he discovered he had a natural fighting ability. No, LL Cool J, you could tell he was the alpha from day one, That he was like a jock in school, all the girls liked him, big, strong, athletic guy, probably punched a few guys out. You could see LL Cool J was that guy from day one. Shout out to Mr. Luca for the super chat. He says, if Dubois wins, I hope he smashes Fury next, to be honest. Depending on if Dubois wins, a Partridge fight happening, in my opinion, in my estimation, would be contingent on how impressive Dubois looks. If he looks too impressive, you might get Partridge remaining, quote-unquote, retired. And maybe chatting-ish from the sidelines, but not actually getting in the ring with Dubois. But if Dubois wins and he doesn't look that impressive, maybe Partridge will take it for the right amount. I mean, he'll still milk it to a ridiculous extent, and he'll want all sorts of money and conditions and clauses. And you know what Partridge is like. Going back to the Atama stuff, even if Atama does have a suspect chin, Dylan White's got a suspect chin too. So then it's a case of who lands first. And I think it's far more likely that Atama's going to land a clean shot first than Dylan White. Shout out to Lawrence King for the super chat. He says, Fury making a fight week about himself when he is 8 months inactive is the most Fury thing ever. It is indeed. Fury loves the attention. It's like when they had the Ring Magazine Awards and Usyk won those awards. Tyson Fury had to put some clip out saying, oh, Dick Turpin wore a mask. You know all that? Yeah, he came out the woodwork because all the attention was on Usyk and other people that were winning awards. And similar thing on Fight Week. Kayvon Green says if Triple D wins, I suspect AJ will get a rematch. Shout out to Lawrence King, who says Fury making... Okay, yeah, I've read that one. By himself is the most Fury thing ever. Also says, problem with a lot of older generation of heavyweights, Fury, Wilder, White, etc., is they got to a point where they fight every 1.5 years on average. Yeah, when they're waiting around, when they're waiting around for rematches to happen. Either they're participating in rematches or they're waiting for a title shot while other fighters are participating in a rematch, you know? Too many rematches in this era. Far too many. Shout out to Ibrahim for the super chat. He says, he loves to pretend like he doesn't like the attention, but he's a fiend for it. Yeah, he's totally addicted to the attention. Tyson Fury is the biggest attention seeker in the heavyweight division by far and loves the attention. It reminds me of that line in the Nas diss track to Jay-Z, Ether, where Nas accuses Jay-Z. He calls him I can't even repeat the words here for the sake of the algorithm, but he calls him something and says, you love the attention. Queens ninjas run this ish. Ask Russell Simmons. Is Russell Simmons still in Bali? Hiding out in Bali? Shout out to Deep Random Thinker. He says, Frank, as in Frank Warren, just confirmed on Ariel and Ade's show that there is a rematch clause for Usyk if Triple D wins. Okay, so a one-way rematch clause. At least it's not two-way. Mr. Lucas says, yeah, he is. Russell Simmons still hiding out in Bali because there were some accusations. He might say it's not because of the accusations. It was all coincidental. He just decided to move out to Bali and never return to the United States and hold yoga retreats out in Bali. That's what Russell Simmons is doing out there. Yoga retreats. Is Russell Simmons smarter than them all? Smarter than Diddy? You know? Smarter than all these other guys? Smarter than R. Kelly and Bill Cosby? Because as soon as Russell Simmons got any sniff of accusations, he was gone, mate. He was out of there. Because Bali's got no extradition, apparently. They have no extradition treaty with the U.S. So that's where he's gone. Shout out to President Brush. He says, in hindsight, did Ben Shalom sell Buatsi a dream? Did Ben Shalom sell Buatsi a dream? Promoters always sell fighters dreams. They have to sell you a dream in order for you to sign with them. So I don't think that's particularly unusual. I guess what you're implying is maybe Ben Shalom didn't believe that Buatsi was as good as he was telling us he was. I don't know. But big up President Brush. And the problems for Ben Shalom and all his fighters right now, right? They don't have a broadcaster, it would seem. Unless they're going to sort out some type of new deal with Sky. There was talk of it being on a show-by-show basis. Therefore, Ben Shalom would have to be presenting the right type of shows. And if that's what he has, then there's going to be an exodus of fighters out of that stable. There has to be. Because they won't have enough dates for everybody. DRW says, what's your prediction? Usyk on points is my prediction. Somebody mentioning Tyler Perry. Shout out to the creators of the Boondocks, Aaron Magruder, and I always forget the other guy's name. Shout out to them because their episode about Tyler Perry, hilarious. If you haven't seen it, It's on YouTube, the whole episode. Just type in The Boondocks, Pause. There's an episode called Pause, and it's all about Tyler Perry. They've changed the name of Tyler Perry to Winston Jerome, and they've changed his appearance because Sony Viacom, I think it is, forced them to change the name and change the appearance so that he wouldn't be called Tyler Perry and wouldn't look like Tyler Perry in the show. Okay? But that episode is hilarious. And the fact that the creators of the Boondocks openly say that it's Tyler Perry that they base that on makes you, even back then, think that there must be some truth to this, or else surely they'd be getting sued out of house and home. The Mardia character that Tyler Perry does is also satirized in that episode of The Boondocks, Pause. And the Mardia character in The Boondocks is called Mardukes. And the Mardukes voice is pretty much identical to the Mardia voice that Tyler Perry does in those weird movies. Winston Jerome is the substitute name. That's right. Carl Jones, thank you, Bite Size Boxing. Yes, Winston Jerome is the substitute name that they use for Tyler Perry in that episode. Hilarious episode. Very Diddy-ish. It was like a precursor to Diddy because it's all about like oil and baby oil and all that stuff. And Tyler Perry was furious apparently when that episode came out. Exactamundo says, never seen Boondocks. It's like a South Park, but more black folk in it. It's not as childish as South Park. Because South Park is very like childish humor. Boondocks isn't really childish humor. It has more of a sitcom. It's more like an animated sitcom without the fake applause, without, fake laughter and applause added, without that. So it's more like a black American sitcom rather than a South Park type situation. But it's very funny. Ibrahim says, what do you think about the talk of Diddy's trafficking case being exaggerated? Totally exaggerated. Totally exaggerated. I'm not at all surprised that he didn't get done on the trafficking. What he did get done for is paying for prostitutes to basically flying prostitutes in. That's what he got done for. But the trafficking stuff always seemed very weak to me, from what I heard. It seemed like it was all consensual and yeah. But you know what it's like in Western society today? It's like they go above and beyond to try and make every single woman, no matter how scandalous she is, into a victim. Little Jacob says, Uncle Rockers is my favorite character. So yeah, Diddy's a wrong'un. There's no question about it. A very, very weird guy. Somebody who I would not want to go anywhere. I wouldn't want to go within 20 miles of him, probably. A very, very, very weird guy. But yeah, the charges from what and I'm no lawyer here, but from the details that I heard and saw, a lot of them charges were seriously trumped up. So he's, in my opinion, upset the wrong people. AJ says, you'd think you'd have it. Yeah, and Star, a.k.a. Troy Terrain, made a great point in one of his recent live streams where he said, these male celebrities, rappers, music moguls, and all these guys need to stop flying these scandalous women out. Stop flying them out. You don't know who these women are. You don't know which one of them is a brass, right? Because that's what Diddy got done for, flying brasses out. Stop flying women out. You don't know who you're flying out, bro. Stop it. You got to be careful dealing with scandalous women. So careful. Yeah, the Boondocks was hilarious. The Gangsterlicious Granddad beef was a highlight in the Boondocks, and the diss track that Gangsterlicious did for Granddad, Robert Freeman. You just mad because your ass is old. You know that? I swear Snoop Dogg was on that track. Because Gangstalicious's crew had Snoop Dogg. Who else was in Gangstalicious's crew? Snoop Dogg and Busta Rhymes. Busta Rhymes was also in Gangstalicious's crew in the Boondocks. Busta Rhymes did the voice of one of them. And yeah, Snoop Dogg did the voice for the other. And also, Samuel L. Jackson did a voice in the Boondocks. He was one of Onceler's, was it nephews? Samuel L. Jackson was in that as well. Ed Onceler, voiced by Samuel L. Jackson. And for those of you who don't know, that's a Caucasian character. A white character was voiced by Samuel L. Jackson. It was supposed to be ironic, you know? Oh, thank you, Kayvon Green. Thugnificent. That's right, not Gangstalicioous. Gangstalicioous was a different rapper in the Boondocks. That's right. Thugnificent was the one with Busta Rhymes and Snoop Dogg and his crew. Gangstalicioous was a different one. Was Gangstalicioous the one? Yeah, he's the one that started promoting wearing skirts. And Riley started wearing a skirt and defending it to Huey, saying, "What are you talking about? You know, this ain't a skirt." Yeah, because Riley was just totally sucked into popular culture. Shout out to President Brush. He says, in your opinion, is Trump on that list? Yes. In my opinion, absolutely. Shout out to President Brush again. Okay, I read that one about Bratzy. Big up President Brush. Shout out to Goozy. Jay says South Park or Boondocks. Boondocks all day. All day. South Park is like childish, you know? It's like humor for 14-year-old boys. Whereas Boondocks it's got a bit of something for everyone in there, you know, for older people with the granddad character. People from different walks of life. Esther A says, I never liked South Park. I liked it when I was probably about 14. You know, I liked it for about 5 minutes when I was 14. When they came out with that, you know, the chef song. With that kind of childish teenage giggling stuff. With the chef song talking about my chocolate salted balls and all that stuff. All that carry on. Yeah, Colonel Stinkmeaner. Well, I named my first PSN account Stinkmeaner. That's how much I like that character. Kyle says, were you 14 when South Park started? I can't tell you for certain what age I was when South Park started, but the first time I watched it, I might have been about 14. In fact, let me check, because it's so long ago. I was 14 in the 1990s. When did South Park actually start? And also what you have to appreciate is back then, American TV series would not launch or debut or however you want to premiere in the UK simultaneously to the States. Sometimes an American series wouldn't come to the UK until like a year or two later. That was quite a common thing back in the 80s and 90s. Britain would get American stuff like way, way, way later, sometimes years later. And so people in the UK will be like, oh, wow, this is new. And Americans are like, what are you talking about? It's like 2 years old. Okay, so South Park actually started in 97. No, so I wasn't 14 then. I was a lot older than 14. Yeah, I was a lot older than 14 by then. So let's say I was late teens, found it funny for about 5 minutes. President Brush says, do you watch RTM? Nah. RTM, I can't do it. I can't do it. They're men of my age, but you'd think they were 15. I can't do it, bro. A whole heap of shouting and over talking and no. That's not for me. In terms of Man Them podcasts, I watch Winners Talking every now and again. I'm not a regular viewer, but if you're talking about Man Them podcasts, Winners Talking is the only one I really watch from time to time. But RTM, no, I can't do it, bro. I can't watch man my age acting like they're 15-year-olds. Can't do it. All right, peeps, going to wrap this one up. It's been a good stream. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed it. I want to pick up everyone who joined the conversation. Special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They were President Brush, Ibrahim, Lawrence King, Mr. Luca, Jack Trussler, Belt Loops Matter, Nathan, Warrior Poet, 3D Pull Tile, James Clifford, Alex, Deep Random Thinker, The Sweet Maths, Arco. I think I got everyone there. Was Matt also in here? Matt, big up Matt as well. So yeah, take care, be good. Thank each and every one of you for locking in. If you haven't already done so, please smash that like button. Helps these streams get seen. Catch you guys on the other side. Peace.